curious how you handled that, because there's so many moving pieces to that. You talked about ball preparation in one of our previous interviews. That's got to factor in. The temperature itself has to factor in. Field conditions have to factor in, whether you're, what you're playing on, what in the condition of that. Then you have the idea that the wind could be 1 point if it's an 8:15 game like Sunday, could be 1 point at 7:30, but then it could be completely different at 9 o'clock and when you're actually kicking in the game, or different at the beginning and the end. So I'm just curious how you kind of take that in and go through that as a kicker, because there's so many variables there.
So the first thing I'll say is we all have this, if you know people in the military that shoot long range, they have a system called DOPE. So you create data upon previous entry, I believe is what that means. So you're gaining experience every time you kick in any field condition. So you start to learn your parameters at this mile per hour, and you start to learn kind of how to gauge the mile per hour. Looking at the flags, there's certain measurements and math you can do for that, and you just get a feel for it. But you start to realize, how much do I need to compensate for a crosswind? If I'm kicking into a wind, what are my range limits? And you get that information throughout your career, and you're just stacking it up. But when you show up for a game, or actually when you have that week before the game, you kind of know what the weather's going to be. The difference is if you're the away team, you may not have the option to replicate that during practice. One thing Belichick was always big on was, we had snow on the ground. He would put a huge tarp over the field, and he had these huge heaters that would blow heat under it, and it would actually inflate over top of the field to keep it warm and keep snow off of it. And then right before practice, he'd pull it off. And we practiced outdoors while it was snowing, while the weather was bad, so we could actually get work done. But he would not go in the bubble, because he's like, we're going to play in it, we're going to practice in it. So you kind of get some scopes of what bad conditions can feel like that way. If you're the home team, obviously you get a chance to go out, kick in your stadium, kind of see what it's going to do. But that pregame warm-up is very important. You get about 14 kicks to figure out what the wind's going to do. And you learn at what distance does the ball move laterally, this much or this much. And you start learning, okay, at this distance I need to aim this much more to the right, or this much more. When I back up, I've got to aim even more. Do I ever aim outside the uprights? Only once in my career did I ever have to aim outside the uprights.
That was going to be my question, because it has to be so tough, because you're doing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even, of kicks over your lifetime, between practice, games, starting out, all of that. It has to be so tough to say, hey, I've been my whole life, I've been trying to get the ball in between these two yellow posts, but for this one kick, I got to aim to the left about 5 feet outside of the posts. But there were a couple kicks, both in practice, and then there was one in the game that for Bates that were like that, where it's like, yeah, you almost had the amount of break that they had from certain distances, that almost seemed to me like an outside the posts kick. So I'm curious how yours went, and if that looked like that kind of weather. Obviously you didn't kick in it or anything, but that looked like that kind of weather for those practice kicks on Sunday.
So I immediately think back to a 32, I believe it was a 32-yard field goal I had on the right hash when I was playing for New England. We were playing in Chicago. It was a Sunday night game, December, I want to say maybe December 10th. I'm not exactly sure. But we played in a blizzard. I mean, they were bringing out the scrapers to scrape the lines off so we could see where to put the ball down on the field. Sustained winds pretty close to 30, 40 miles an hour, gusting up to 70. In pregame warm-up, the snapper had to chase the ball a few times because it was blowing the ball off the field as we just sat it down to prep for the plays. In that game, I had a 32-yard field goal on the right hash. It was the only field goal that I really remember aiming outside the upright. The wind, I mean, the goalpost, you can see it in the TV copy. It's on YouTube. The ball starts outside the right upright, and it barely lands just inside the left corner of the goalpost. And the kick was good. I went 3 for 3 that day. And The one thing I always felt is under extreme conditions like that, I had nothing to worry about because the expectations are so low. Everyone's like, holy cow, how can they do this? So I never had that like inert feeling of I'm afraid of screwing up because they don't expect me to do well, so I'm just going to feel free and let loose.
It's almost the opposite of the regular scenario because you have too much pressure on you in the regular scenario. Like, hey, you don't have any field conditions.
Exactly.
Hey, it's easy. Some schlub sitting on their couch like me. Well, that's easy. But then it's reversed because then you're feeling a little bit more pressure maybe for that. With this one, you don't have the pressure, but you do have the circumstances where people know that that's not easy, even though it's not easy at any point in time, even with clear conditions, because you have so many other factors.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what makes those type of games fun, is when you do the ordinary in that situation, it's the perception is that you did something extraordinary, and it makes you look good. So you feel good because you're like, nothing to lose. I'm not afraid of this. I don't care. So it's a good situation to be in, but also when you're able to do that, you're just building experience for the future for when you may have something worse or when you may have something slightly less. You're just building that data for you to use later.
I didn't think of it as a database because I thought of it as so many unique, almost like a snowflake, unique situations. But it does make sense that, you're the type of wind, the angle of the wind, all of those things that then compiles, hey, I had this similar type of wind at a game 2 years ago. There was a similar distance at a game 3 years ago, whatever. And so you compile all that. So that's interesting. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of with that game.
I actually have notebooks from my whole career of every practice. Every page is a practice or a game. And every time I kicked in a stadium that I hadn't kicked in, I had a full synopsis of what the wind patterns were in that stadium. I would look at weather reports. I would see with the winds coming out of the here, out of the there, whatever. And I would look at game film, and I would see on that day what was the weather doing. And I would actually use that information so that I could know before I got there kind of what to expect. And all of that experience. I mean, that's what some people say, I never lose, I only learn. All of that experience is just building up so you can use it again towards something positive in the future, and really just being able to observe it, see it from other people's experiences. I mean, it's kind of a parallel to life if you think about it, but it's that's what makes, if I'm being honest, that's what makes guys who play a few years and guys who play 10, 15, 20 years. That's the difference.